At 3:20 in the morning, the skies above the Persian Gulf were absolute darkness. No warning, no intercept order, no alarm. A single aircraft, decades old and long dismissed by Western intelligence as tactically irrelevant, dropped off the edge of every radar screen covering the northern Gulf and vanished into the black. It flew so low that the sea surface itself became its shield, skimming just meters above the waves, invisible to the most advanced airborne surveillance network ever deployed in the region. And then, without a single defensive shot fired in response, it climbed, released its payload, and walked bombs directly into Camp Buehring, one of the most heavily defended American military installations in the Middle East. The explosions came before the warning. Fuel depots ignited in successive walls of fire. Communication lines were severed in the first seconds, and across every command center from Kuwait City to the Fifth Fleet, a single, impossible question began flashing across every screen at once. What just hit us? The answer was not a hypersonic missile, not a stealth aircraft, not a next-generation drone developed in secret. It was an F-5E Tiger, a fighter first designed in the 1970s, upgraded and renamed the Kausar by Iranian engineers, and flown by a single pilot who understood something critical about modern air defense that the system itself had not yet caught up to. Detection and classification are not the same thing. For weeks, tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran had been escalating across a chain of reciprocal strikes that left every regional military on a knife's edge. Tehran had studied every gap, every blind corridor, every second of delay between radar contact and engagement authorization. And on this morning, they threaded a Cold War relic through the most sophisticated air defense architecture on Earth. The fires were still spreading when Iran's next move was already in motion. The F-5E did not simply fly toward its target. It was choreographed. The pilot descended to terrain-hugging altitude the moment wheels left Iranian soil, dropping so low over the Persian Gulf that the aircraft's exhaust was visible only to the fish below. At that height, the curvature of the Earth itself becomes a weapon. Ground-based radar systems, no matter how powerful, cannot bend their signals around the horizon. The Kausar exploited this physical limitation with surgical precision, threading the dead zone that exists between Kuwait's land-based sensor network and the E-3 Sentry AWACS orbiting overhead. Too low for one, too small and cluttered for the other. For several critical minutes, it existed in neither world. But the pilot was not flying alone in terms of strategic support. As the Kausar skimmed the wavetops, Iran simultaneously flooded the entire regional airspace with Shahed drone swarms and fabricated missile signatures across multiple vectors. Dozens of phantom contacts lit up defensive displays simultaneously. Every intercept controller in the region was now chasing shadows, splitting decision-making capacity across threats that did not exist, buying the real aircraft exactly the seconds it needed. The defense network was not defeated by firepower. It was defeated by arithmetic. Too many inputs, too little time, and one real signal buried inside an ocean of manufactured noise. By the time the Kausar pulled up from the Gulf surface and crossed into Kuwaiti airspace, the window for early intercept had already closed. The bombs released, the fires started, and Iran's opening move had landed exactly where it was intended. What looked like a desperate gamble using obsolete hardware was in reality a precisely engineered exploitation of the one vulnerability no procurement budget can eliminate: the gap between seeing something and being certain enough to shoot it. The fires at Camp Buehring were still consuming fuel lines when the U.S. military shifted from defense to pursuit in under 90 seconds. The E-3 Sentry AWACS immediately expanded its surveillance envelope, pushing tracking coverage across the northern Gulf as F-35A Lightning IIs and F-15E Strike and Eagles, already airborne on combat air patrol, were vectored hard into the suspected withdrawal corridor. Simultaneously, an MQ-9 Reaper operating west of Kuwait repositioned its ISR track, locking its sensors onto the retreating heat signature of the Kausar as it descended back toward the wavetops. Within minutes, the most capable aerial pursuit package in the world was converging on a single target, and it still could not fire. This was the part Iran had calculated correctly. The F-35A achieved radar lock repeatedly. Targeting cues were confirmed. Firing solutions were established and updated in real time through fused data from the AWACS and the Reaper below. Every technical condition for engagement had been met multiple times over. But the Kausar was flying directly through one of the most congested maritime corridors on the planet, surrounded by civilian tanker traffic and commercial flight paths that made target classification a legal minefield. Rules of engagement required positive identification beyond sensor lock. Deconfliction protocols prevented engagement near civilian corridors. The trigger could not be pulled without certainty, and certainty in a cluttered low-altitude environment takes time that a fast-moving target does not give you. So the pursuit became something rarer and more dangerous than a dogfight. It became a tracking operation under fire, a continuous effort to maintain lock on a target specifically designed to exploit every second of hesitation built into the most restrained military doctrine in history. The F-35A followed. The Reaper watched, and the Kausar kept running, buying every meter of distance it could between itself and the weapons that could not yet legally touch it. The moment Iran detected that the Kausar was being tracked and the pursuit was tightening, Tehran activated its second layer. Along the southern coastline, electronic warfare stations came online simultaneously, broadcasting radar emissions across shifting frequencies and power bands, flooding the operational airspace with layered phantom emitters that mimicked genuine flight profiles. In parallel, waves of low-cost UAVs were launched along multiple diverging vectors, not as weapons, but as actors, each one engineered to replicate the radar return signature of the real target, closely enough to force classification decisions that consumed precious seconds. These decoy routes were deliberately threaded through civilian air corridors and dense commercial shipping lanes, weaponizing the same congestion the Kausar had used during its ingress. Within minutes, the tactical display across every U.S. platform filled with ghost contacts, tracks that appeared, persisted briefly, and vanished, or worse, persisted just long enough to look real. The battle space had transformed from a pursuit into a discrimination problem. Every return on every screen now required individual validation against thermal data, flight trajectory stability, and motion correlation before any engagement decision could be authorized. Iran had effectively converted the U.S. military's own rules and safeguards into friction. But what Tehran had not accounted for was how deeply the U.S. had already restructured for exactly this environment. The F-35A stopped acting as a fighter and became a network. Real-time fused data from AWACS, the Reaper, and ground-based radar systems was pushed continuously across every connected platform, allowing each contact to be reclassified based on cross-referenced inputs rather than individual sensor confidence. F-15Es dropped to lower intercept altitude, ready to engage the moment the real target separated from protected corridors. Iran had built a wall of noise. The U.S. built a filter faster than the noise could move. The Kausar crossed back into Iranian airspace, and Tehran declared victory before sunrise. State media broadcast the strike footage within the hour. Commanders celebrated the humiliation of American air defense. A 50-year-old fighter had penetrated the most advanced sensor network on Earth, dropped ordnance on a U.S. installation, and returned home without being shot down. By every visible measure, Iran had won something real. What they did not know was that the F-35A and the MQ-9 Reaper had never stopped watching, not because they failed to engage, because they were ordered not to. Throughout the entire withdrawal, every electronic emission the Kausar triggered a response from was logged. Every relay station that activated to guide it home was mapped. Every drone command node that fed its deception corridor was identified and geolocated in real time. The retreating aircraft had not escaped a sensor net. It had walked through one deliberately left open, trailing a data signature that reconstructed Iran's entire penetration architecture point by point. The F-5E was not a target anymore. It was a key, and it had just unlocked every door Iran had spent years hiding behind. The counterstrike came without announcement. Tomahawk missiles launched from U.S. naval vessels in the Gulf arrived at Iranian coastal infrastructure before Tehran had finished writing its victory statement. Radar corridors were destroyed. Relay stations went silent. Drone coordination centers were eliminated in coordinated strikes timed to arrive simultaneously across multiple sites. F-35A and F-15E platforms executed precision seed operations, collapsing the electronic warfare nodes that had powered the entire deception network. Cyber operations severed what missiles did not reach. In less than one operational cycle, Iran's entire strike architecture ceased to exist. The fires at Camp Buehring had barely cooled. and Iran had just learned the most expensive lesson in modern warfare. Surviving a strike is not the same as winning one.